Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I'm up. Guys, this one is going to be relatively quick. I just want to do it once, which is why I am doing it live. So fuck it, we'll do it live. Alright, my mic is up. Good. This wasn't originally planned, but I saw this and it bugged the shit out of me, so I want to say something about it. I live in Virginia, and because I live in Virginia, this is literally in my backyard. So this took place today. Democratic lawmakers in the House hold up a hammer and sickle behind an image of a colleague aligned with the Democratic Socialists. This asshole sitting back here. This guy is having a speech. This is the candidate that was elected by the DSA. What's his name? Lee Carter, Delegate Lee Carter. Now, Delegate Lee Carter, member of the Democratic Socialists of America, got to this position on his own steam. The Democrats essentially didn't necessarily help him out, and he got there on his own steam, shocked the shit out of everybody, won his campaign. He's in Congress answering a question. Essentially, they're trying to do this tax to the bottom, this race to the bottom, giving away more corporate tax money. And him being a Democratic Socialist of America, him being there representing workers and representing the regular people in this country, actually believing the thing that he actually went to Congress for. I'm going to represent my district. I'm going to represent the people of this country and the workers of this country. Makes this point of, look, we need to build the society from the ground up. Meaning our society should be built around people. It should not be built around this thing of gutting taxes. It shouldn't be gutting taxes. Ultimately, those taxes are being used for particular reasons. The goal of this is not to cut taxes as much as possible. The goal is to create a society that's best for the people of that particular society, meaning for the workers and for the majority of the society, not for the top 1%. For that, for him making that point, and he even gave him the benefit of the doubt, which means he's a better person than me because I think these people are usually bought. But he gave him the benefit of the doubt. He said, I think you guys mean well, but we should not be building a society that's purely for the top 1% with this idea of a race to the bottom in taxes. It should be built around the middle class. It should be built around workers. And for that, this asshole held up the communist sign, the Russian sickle. The prick in the back, the hack, the corporatist Democrat that didn't like the idea of supporting workers is named Delegate Mark Keam of Fairfax. Corporate Democrat who disliked what this gentleman was saying with regards to backing up and using society or using government to support workers. That's what he objected to. He thought that saying that we should build a society that is not a race to the bottom in regards to cutting taxes for corporations and for the top 1%. That was a bridge too far for him, and that sounded like a commie to him. Delegate Mark Keam, he apologized for this, by the way. Let me read the story first, because it's whatever he wants to say with the apology. Nobody's laughing, asshole. You've disagreed with something, and in disagreeing with something, you've essentially told who you actually are. You had Tom Perez jumping around the country like a maniac, screaming about his values, and nobody knew what the hell Tom Perez's values were. What you could look at, however, was what the party does. What are your values? Meaning, what do you actually do? Because ultimately, that's the thing that I can judge you by. You can say whatever you want. How does what you're saying align with the actual world that we're living in? Objective reality. And if you're saying something that contrasts or cuts against reality, then that tells me something about you. Now, the reason I say it that way from the standpoint of, if Democrats want to scream about their values, if Democrats want to scream that they are for the workers and for the 99% and they're the Workers' Party and everything else, and this guy is literally out there making an argument for workers. He's making an argument for workers. And the corporate Democrat, revealing who he is, revealing his values, makes some joke about the guy being a communist because he's trying to represent fucking workers. That tells me everything about you. That tells me nothing about him. It does tell what he says tells me something about him because it gives me his perspective, meaning the DSA candidate, the DSA lawmaker. The other corporate hack, Keam, the one who thought, hey man, he's talking about helping workers. He's talking about a bridge too far. This guy sounded a little bit communist to me. And you believe that putting these people in office is going to get anything done. Let's take a look at the story. A Democratic lawmaker apologized Monday after jokingly holding up a hammer and sickle behind an image of Delegate Lee Carter, a freshman legislator who is also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Delegate Mark Keam, delegate of Fairfax, later apologized on the House floor for using a tablet to hold up the communist symbol behind Carter, Prince William, Democrat from Prince William. Unfortunately, he ran as a Democrat, shamefully, at the meeting of the House of Delegates Finance Committee. But the episode could further strain relations between House Democrats and the anti-corporate left. I'm glad they denote that he's part of the corporate wing of the party. During a debate on legislation to offer tax breaks to companies that create jobs in economically depressed areas, Carter said the bill may be a good faith effort to help combat poverty, but relies on deeply flawed mechanism. The mechanism of racing to the bottom by cutting and hacking and slashing away at our tax code to fight over scraps and handouts from billionaires rather than trying to build an economy from the ground up that would actually help the people that are already here. Carter said. Sitting behind Carter, Keam can be seen shaking his head and laughing at the comments. Now, understand what's being said now, because it's important to understand what he's shaking his head at. Because my contention is this tells everything about him. This says everything about who he is. And you need to think twice about wanting to put somebody like this in office if this is what they're going to shake their head on. My contention is this is just a typical Democrat. They're corporatists. At the end of the day, what they look for is who's paying me. If this guy's going to pay me, then I'm going to lean in that particular direction. You have this guy here who's upsetting the apple cart because he's actually a true believer. I believe we should be here to help workers. I believe we should be here to help the majority of the population, not just the top 1%. Oh, you're looking a little commie, dude. You're sounding like a communist. You're talking about helping workers with the Democratic Party. We don't believe in that. Let's finish this off. Sitting behind Carter, Keam can be seen shaking his head and laughing at the comments. And again, the comments being the mechanism of racing to the bottom by cutting and hacking, slashing away at our tax code to fight over scraps and handouts from billionaires rather than trying to build an economy for the ground up that would actually help the people that are already here. And yeah, he's shaking his head. Oh, I don't like that. That's Keam. Delegate Mark Keam. He doesn't like this idea of building an economy for workers. He dislikes that. He dislikes that so intensely, that building an economy that's working with this idea of workers and the rest of the public as opposed to building an economy for the top 1%. To him, anything helping workers comes across as being socialist. Clearly, I mean, it's not me making it up. If this is what Carter is saying, and he's disagreeing with what Carter is saying, and Carter is talking about building an economy from the ground up that actually help people that are already here, and he's disagreeing with that, then what can I say? What else can I take away from it? He disagrees with this idea of building an economy for everybody else. This is your Democratic Party. Keam apologized on the House floor a short while later, saying the conduct may have violated a House rule against using any language or gesture calculated to wound, offend, or insult another member. Yeah. That's exactly what you did, asshole. Keam said lawmakers sometimes go overboard in their attempts at humor. Who's laughing? You're the only one that's laughing. And I would make the case that this wasn't funny. Not only wasn't it funny, this reveals who you and what your party is. Who you are and what your party is. We should help workers. Oh, this guy sounds like a communist. He's talking about helping workers. I have his apology, and I'll let you hear his apology. Carter didn't immediately comment on the incident, but he seemed visibly unhappy when Keam approached him to talk about after the House adjourned. Other Democratic leaders also got involved in what apparently was an attempt to smooth things over. Look, there is no smoothing things over. You can either deal with people like this, or you can get that guy out of his seat. There is no smoothing things over with those types. Ultimately, they don't agree with you. You believe that you should have an economy that works for the bottom, meaning the economy should be geared towards the proletariat, towards the workers. The workers do the work. They should have the control of the means of production. That Democrat is never going to believe that. In his head, he wants an economy that for the most part is market-driven. And he fundamentally disagrees with what he's saying here, saying that the economy should work for workers. He fundamentally disagrees. Again, this tells you everything about Democrats, nothing about the person from DSA. What the person from DSA is saying is right. What kind of society do you want? Do you want the society that you have now, where the top 1% essentially rapes the rest of the country, going with this idea of tax policies and everything else that goes towards their interests? Tax policies, trade policies, laws, the political apparatus in and of itself, geared towards the top 1%? Or do you want something that's geared towards other people, human beings, the bottom 99%? His point is, look, if you're going to build a society, build it for the bottom 99. Build it for the workers. Build it for the workers. Who are you here to represent? Are you here to represent your constituency, meaning the workers and the people in that constituency, or are you here to represent the top 1%? The other Democrat is like, I'm here to represent the top 1%. I don't know what you're here for, buddy. Here's the other thing. So Keam did respond. What's interesting here is that they fail to realize communism, socialism, and democratic socialism are all separate ideologies, Carter said in a Twitter response to an image showing what Keam had done behind him. A former Marine who grew up in North Carolina, who stands to the left of most elected Democrats in economic and labor issues, Carter has an uneasy history with the House Democratic Caucus. He won without major support from the caucus when he ran last year against Republican delegate Jackson Miller in the 50th District. Carter said party leaders essentially cut him off after he declined to provide them with the detailed information about how he was running his campaign. He ran without him. He had no tethers to the party at all. The party essentially was like, we need all of this information and we need you to spend a certain amount on consultants. He blew them off and he ran the campaign the way he wanted to run that campaign, and he won. He won. House Republicans have made plenty of cracks about Carter's ideology, once joking audibly on the House floor that he might oppose a resolution designating November 7th as Victims of Communism Day. Carter supported the revolution, which passed 98-0. You people are idiots. You people are absolute idiots, including Keam. You people are idiots. Yeah, they don't know the difference between those things. They're Americans, so they probably don't know the difference between communism, socialism, all that stuff. Fair enough. But beyond that point, what about a Victims of Capitalism Day? I mean, do you know how stupid that sounds? How many people around the globe are in dire straits? How many people around the globe, meaning have been hurt by corporate interests? How many people around the globe, meaning even costs that are externalized to the rest of the public itself, as opposed to the top 1% making their ends? Take just oil and gas by itself. Put everything else off the table, oil and gas. One of the main drivers of climate change. Now, yes, you have the top 1% that, for whatever reason, we've delegated with controlling our energy markets. Well, you have 1% that gets massive amounts of profit from this. You have massive amounts, billions of dollars that go into tax cuts for with this particular industry. And they externalize all of the negative consequences to the rest of the society. The money that they're making doesn't necessarily include the environmental toll and the environmental impact that's adversely affecting us. One of the main drivers for climate change is oil and gas. The second one is animal agriculture. But again, those costs are externalized onto the rest of the public itself, while the profits for those things float to the top. I think it's immensely telling that Democrat got pissed off when the senator is making an argument, or when the delegate is making an argument, literally about, we need to build an economy for workers. We need to build an economy for workers. Let's hear his apology.
Doug at SF4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, last week we heard a wonderful statement from my good friend from Virginia Beach about the need for civility, trust, and decorum, and being cordial and courtesy with each other. And I took that to heart last week, and I applauded him for his courage in speaking up. I unfortunately failed to pass the test myself. This morning I had an incident where I believe I violated Rule 57 of the House rules myself by conducting myself not in the decorum of this body, by making jest of one of my colleagues in the House. And even though sometimes we get overboard by laughing and having fun with each other in terms of our debates, I don't think that the House nor any of our committees should be a place where we, we bring juvenile jokes like that. And so on behalf of myself, with full full acknowledgement of my behavior. I apologize to the body and to my good friend from Prince William County for putting himself in that position, and I will try my best to live up to my standards as a member of this body going forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He's not your goddamn friend. You guys have fundamentally different ideologies on this stuff, and if you were his friend, you wouldn't have showed up a goddamn Russian sickle, the communist symbol. And there is a difference between the guy being a democratic socialist and this thing of communism. They're conflating the two. Either he's too stupid to know the difference between those things, or he's just a fucking liar when he's putting this out there like that to attack the guy. I still make this point that I want to drill home. What he took issue with was the guy talking about workers. Like, that's embarrassing. You're a Democrat. You're calling yourself the party of workers. You're trying to smooth over this thing of this kind of people who are against the corporatists of the Democratic Party. Now, my point is, the fact is, you can't have a party that has workers and plutocrats in it, because it's automatically going to go towards where the energy goes. You can't have it both ways. You either have something that represents workers' interests, or you have somebody that represents plutocratic interests. Now, Democrats have called this moderates. We're moderates. We take a bunch of money, and then we say things that progressives like, even though we don't really move in that direction. We can't move in that direction because the pay that we're getting, the money that they pay us, keeps us on a leash. But we say nice things. We say pretty things. We say things that make people feel a particular way. But no, we're not going to do those things. In this case, you have a true believer. You have a true believer. The guy believes enough to call himself a democratic socialist. And in this shining moment is literally in Congress doing what his constituents sent him there to do, to represent their interests. I'm trying to nail this down in the gravity of what's being done here. He's literally there representing the interests of the people who sent him there. He calls himself a goddamn socialist. He is representing their interests. We need to build a society for workers. This guy, he doesn't like that. This guy doesn't like that. That Democrat, that random, typical Democrat, doesn't like the fact that the guy wants to build a society for workers, and that laws should be created in a way that advantages workers. You're in the wrong party, buddy. You're in the wrong party. Or maybe you're not in the wrong party. I think at the end of the day, what it means is you just need another party. If the left wants to get anything done, this is not the party you're going to get that done in. They have a fundamental difference of opinion in regards to what a society should look like. And yes, they've been co-opted by the factors that were in the Republican Party, because these things run on cash. Here's a bunch of money. I need you to do favors and tricks. He doesn't like a true believer. A true believer makes him look bad. Same reason Bernie Sanders makes other Democrats look bad. So this one is not going to stay long. Let's see if there's anybody here. Lorms, if I could maybe be queen for a while, every man, woman, and child would have a strong handle on civics and their rights as citizens, and few other things will be fixed quickly. I feel you, man. That's Keam for those keeping scorecards. Yeah, Keam. Get his ass out of his seat. If you want to punish him, in Britain, they have this system called Momentum. It's a organization. Momentum has been growing. They have been aggressive in pushing the agenda of Jeremy Corbyn. And it's been working in this kind of coordinated way between like an outside game and an inside game. We need something like that. Because for shit like this, he needs to be dragged out of his seat. And I mean, from a political standpoint, he needs to be primaried. He needs to lose in his district. They need to know that that shit is not permissible and that shit doesn't fly. And beyond that, like I said, it gets across who he actually is and what he actually believes. Is that really who you want representing your interests? The guy who is not on board for workers, who's joking the guy who's actually talking about workers and workers' rights and building a society from the ground up for workers, for the majority of the population. Do you really want to support the Democrat that's fundamentally taking the perspective of the Republican? Is that who you want to support? Is that who you want to support? There really needs to be something that can affect the left's political will. In the same way that the NRA scares the shit out of people, there needs to be something on the left that does the same thing. That for people like this who trespass, get dragged out of their seats. So the guy who had that attack on Jeremy Corbyn, they were having an unseat party. Essentially having all these people come to talk about the protests and to create this rally to unseat that person who was going after Corbyn. I think the same thing should be done here. Unseat his ass. His name is Keam. Get him out that seat. Primary Keam. And even if you don't necessarily primary, if he wins, he needs to lose that election. Make a fucking joke from the sidelines when your ass gets taken out of office. So I'm going to end that. Look, I would wager that most people don't know what communism, socialism, democratic socialism. I don't think most people knows what those things are. And even when you talk about them, people have different definitions for what those things mean. It's not the easiest thing in the world to say this guy's a socialist, this guy's a communist, this guy's something else. So right off the bat, it's somewhat sketchy to act like the guy is a Soviet. It's fucking insane. It's fucking insane. So him being a democratic socialist, a society that's talking about like either the UK or something like a Denmark, where there's services for the public itself, meaning there's somewhat of a state and the state provides certain services. And it's social democracy. I mean, that's what it boils down to. There's no other way to put it. That's what the guy's advocating for. He's not advocating for fucking communism. Especially not, and when they say communism, they usually talk about this kind of Stalinism. They don't even talk about communism per se. Look, it's a smear. And I don't necessarily like the xenophobic smear. And I damn sure don't necessarily think it's funny. And I think it gets across who that Democrat is and who the Democratic Party is versus who the Democratic Socialists of America are. I'm trying to show that there is a distinction in those things. He thinks it's funny to have an argument about fighting for workers' rights. That should tell you everything that you need to know about Keam. So that's Keam from Fairfax in Virginia. If there's an opportunity to take his ass out of his seat, take his ass out of his seat. I'll leave it at that. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys.